we lived here in the summertime at the pavilion, and I would take telegrams down to the 4 cottage owners on what is now the Pemaquid Trail. The first 2 cottage owners, one was from Fairfield, was a Savage family. The second place was a Hoyt cottage, and they were from Lewiston. He was a vacuum cleaner salesman, and there's not much change in them. The Brown cottage looks the same. The Spiller cottage is exactly the same. The Hoyt cottage is now much different, and the May cottage, which is the Savage cottage, is the first cottage, and they've done a beautiful job renovating it, and they have beautiful flower gardens. Well, the Maine people came, the Hoyts were here full time, the Savages came at a different time, but the 2 New York families spent the summer there. And I'm not sure they even had a well down there. And the iceman would go down twice a week to take ice. There was no power and no phones. And the first 2 cottages were owned by Maine people, and they were very concerned that their food got over there. The 2 New York families didn't care about their food. They wanted to make sure the liquor got over there. Yeah, there was a little makeshift bridge, and the ice truck could get over there. And the ice man, one of the people who owned a cottage, the New York people, knew he liked to have a cocktail. So they'd pour him a glass of some sort of liquor. Instead of going down at the end of the day when he had just very little ice, he'd go down the first thing in the morning and get the ice truck stuck. I would take supplies, take messages down to them, and do errands for them, and they might tip me a quarter or something. Oh, I think they started putting the road down in there in the late 50s, early 60s. That's how you got to the beach. In the 50s, there was a dry town. In old Bristol days, we usually had a Navy vessel come in, and the sailors would get off, and the first thing they were looking for was a girlfriend and something to drink, so they'd go to South Bristol.
There was a ferry that left from Gilbert's Lobster Pound, which is now the Contented Soul, and it would go and it would take people all the way over to Boothbay Harbor.
Gilbert's owned it.
Gilbert's owned it.
Yeah.
And take them over to Boothbay Harbor. Actually had a stop at Pemaquid Point, where there was a pier going out, and then it would pick some more people up, go there, come back. So we'd spend the day over in Boothbay Harbor and go there by water.
The Partridge family owned the beach, and they offered it to the town for $50,000. They had a special town meeting in September, and they argued for 3 hours about it. Finally, the first selectman, Ed Lewis, was a very prominent and important man to the town of Bristol, and he had a swear word I won't repeat. He said, "Please buy that piece of property," and they bought it. And I was chairman of the Park Commission, so my first project, within 2 or 3 years, Ed Lewis died, and we had wanted to put an athletic field in. So my 2 partners on the Park Commission agreed with me, so we put in an athletic field, and we call it the Lewis Athletic Field, in memory of Ed Lewis. Dedication there, when it was completed, and we had 1,000 people to the dedication. My mother died when I was 10 years old, 70 years ago, and my aunt, who had Lewis Pavilion, raised me. I was with her for about 12 or 15 years. My aunt married a Lewis, and the dance pavilion set up in the village. And when their mother died, she died after her husband died, she left the farm and all the land to the 2 children that weren't married. And my uncle's brother and sister disliked him, so they made him move the dance pavilion. The yellow house they had here, that was a Lewis farmhouse. They've changed it now, they've moved it around and everything. And this building wasn't here, but the pavilion sat in here. Right in there. When my aunt had it moved. And this is where Henry Tarr lived, that gave the beach and paid to have it moved. They had no money and no place to move it. So Henry Tarr, a very prominent man here at Pemaquid Beach, gave my aunt and her husband 3/4 of Little Beach, which the family now still owns. And then my aunt says, we have no money to move the building. He says, I hate them so much, I'll pay to have it moved. So he paid. It was a firm from East Blue Bay come over, and they moved it down all in one piece. And they said it never could be moved. And that's where my aunt set up. She had a little grocery store. She had a little lunchroom. She had dances. And at one time, it was a battle of music twice a week. There'd be two named bands out of Boston playing. One would stop and the other one would start up. And they would live in her house up on the Huddle Road, because we were living here at the Pavilion. And they would play at a lower rate because they was getting, and some of them found a wife here. And so it was a very famous spot. And then it went down the same day that John Kennedy was assassinated. We had a bad November gale. The building was on post, and the undertow and the rain and the wind, it went down. The saddest sight I ever saw.